All right.
Amen. Please be seated. Happy New Year again. I know some of you got caught in the rain last week, but we are sunny and man, it's beautiful outside. I can still wear short sleeves. My name is Keith. I'm one of the pastors. I'm so glad to see everyone here. We are starting off the new year today with our new series, and we're glad you're here. A couple announcements that I think are just important as you get here to hear and understand. The first thing is this connection card. We love to connect, and it's not, we're going to bother you. I send an email out every week just to give you guys what's going on and keep you in the know. But it's also a way we can get stuff from you if you need anything. So please fill this out. If you have any questions, you have anything you want to get involved in, just write it on here and slide it in one of the boxes outside or on the wall going out. If you're new here, bring this to the coffee shop. We have a gift for you. We want to thank you for choosing to come worship with us. And you could be anywhere, but you came to join us, and that is awesome. Bring that to the coffee shop, and we have a gift for you again. The next thing is life groups. We usually go through life groups every 3 sessions of court, probably 3 times a year. This time we have one life group for men on Mondays, and then everything else we're doing this biblical citizenship class. And it's incredible. We have 65 people signed up. It starts Tuesday. Man, that is awesome. To come together, to learn truth, to dive into the Bible and to dive into the American Constitution, it's going to be incredible. If you haven't signed up and you want to, on this card, please just write that down and I'll send you the link. It's free. It will not cost you anything. We'll have the books. When it says in your thing, get the book, you don't have to. We have them for you for free. So I just got to get a number for Tuesday night, 6 o'clock. It'll be 6 to 8 every Tuesday for 8 weeks, starting this one, the 10th. But if you have not yet signed up and that's something you want to do, again, come and join us. 65 of us are already coming. We did open up to the town, so we have some people coming from the town, and we're going to celebrate and just learn together. And the last thing before we get going is on January 22nd, we'll keep announcing it, but we're going to have a Meet the Pastor time. It'll be right in here after church. If you want to get to know us and meet us and ask questions and really dive into who we are, we really don't have a membership class. These kind of take that place. But if you have any questions, that's the time to come. We'll have snacks for you. It won't be long. You'll meet the team and get to ask us questions. So we're so glad you're here. Let's settle in. We're going through the 7 deadly sins today. We're going to hit on pride. We're so glad you're here.
Ooh, good morning. Morning. Hi. The hat backwards was a hit last time, so I'm doing it again. So that's probably going to become my standard routine now. Draw your line. Draw your line. You know, on every battlefield, there is a fight that occurs. Got to put my password in. There are territorial lines that are drawn. Most of the fight is a contention between who controls this territory or this territory. A lot of the time, a fight can be decided, a battle can be won or lost depending on where that line lays. That line, it moves back and forth on the battlefield. There's a push and then there's a retreat, and there's a push and there's a retreat, and there's a flank. It turns, it spins, it moves. The line itself almost feels like it's alive. That line is the point of contention. As the fight progresses, the whole battle just becomes a dance to either advance that line and secure more territory or relinquish that line and lose it. Draw the line. In this series, we're going to examine what we call the 7 deadly sins. And we're doing that because we want to beg the question in your life for each of these vices, where do you draw that line? Now, the 7 deadly sins, they were first coined by an Eastern Christian man by the name of Evagrius Ponticus. It was around the 4th century CE. around the 4th century CE. He was writing to fellow believers about things that he personally found were disruptive in your walk in the faith, in your walk with Christ. He coined these terms the 8 evil thoughts. Pope Gregory I, he was called Gregory the Great, enumerated these 8 evil thoughts into the Catholic Church. They kind of accepted it as doctrine and taught it. And then a little bit further past him, Thomas Aquinas, the philosopher and theologian, revised, condensed, and renamed those 8 evil thoughts, giving us today what we call the 7 deadly sins. Now, all of these 7 sins, these 7 vices are dangerous, but both Gregory and Aquinas believed that pride was the most dangerous of them all. You see, in Proverbs chapter 16, we're told that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Solomon believed that pride led immediately to destruction, that it led immediately to a fall, and there's good reason to believe that. See, the thought is that through pride, all of the other sins, they kind of gain a foothold. Pride essentially opens the gate for other vices to storm this city that is your soul. Pride can display itself openly. It can be hyper-boastful and easily visible, or it can be subtle and quiet and hard to spot. Pride is crafty and it's cunning. You can't even deny pride without seeming prideful. Is there a more prideful statement in the universe than "I'm a humble person"? With pride, even when you are right, you are wrong. And because of pride, when you are wrong, you'll refuse to admit it. Pride will lock you in a prison of your own making, and it'll have you proud to be his prisoner. That is pride. Let's kill him. Pride wears 2 disguises. With each disguise, he presents himself in 2 different ways. The first disguise, this is one that we know pretty easily, it's pretty open disguise, it's arrogance. Arrogance. Arrogance is kind of like that uncle that you have at a family gathering that's hyper-opinionated. He's always looking to start fights with everyone else there. Usually he's overly boastful without any evidence to support his theories, often odd. He's loud, obnoxious, and he's usually not quite sober. Like your uncle, you love him because he's family, but you kind of just ignore his presence as best you can, let him do his own thing. Isn't that what we see in our lives? See, every one of us in this room, all of us have some degree of arrogance, but none of us want to admit that. We'd rather let that little bit of arrogance do his thing, and we'll just pretend like we don't notice it. We ignore his presence. In Ezekiel 28, we actually find a pretty spot-on display of this version of pride, this disguise that pride likes to wear. And through the words of Ezekiel, God pronounces judgment on the prince of Tyre. Now, Tyre was a very wealthy place during this time. Tyre was a merchant city. It was set on the coast. They had the strongest navy in the world. They were the center of trade. They commanded all naval trade. Nobody could contend with them. Now, Tyre used to be allies with Israel. The cedars from Lebanon that Solomon gets shipped over to build the temple for Yahweh, those were supplied by Tyre. Tyre was allies with Israel for a very long time. King David was close friends with the ruler in his time, and Solomon was friends with the ruler in his time. But this new king, Ethbaal III is his name, which means literally with Baal. He was particularly proud of Tyre. You see, Tyre, over time, Ethbaal did some very good business decisions, and he built the wealth of Tyre up quite a lot. He was very proud of what he did. And when he took the throne, he exalted himself as a god. He claimed that Tyre's wealth and grandeur all came from his wisdom, and therefore he was divine. Nobody could compete with how wise he is. No god could challenge him. Ezekiel chapter 28, starting in verse 2, we read, "This is the proclamation that God makes against Tyre. It says, 'Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Your heart is proud, and you said, I am a god. I sit in the seat of gods in the heart of the seas, yet you are a man and not a god, though you think you are godlike. Look, you are wiser than Daniel. No secret is hidden from you.'" That is dripping with just spite. Daniel was an advisor for the king of Babylon, and it was Babylon ultimately that would come and force Tyre down. They led the destruction of it. "By your wisdom and understanding, you have gained wealth for yourself. You have amassed gold and silver in your treasuries. By your great skill in trade, you have increased your wealth, and your heart is proud because of your wealth." I want us to look at how the king's arrogance is displayed here. Ethbaal considers himself a god because with his wisdom, he has amassed gold and silver. He has become wealthy by his decisions. And that's how arrogant pride likes to present. It starts with an I have, and then we have the I am. I have and I am. In this case, Ethbaal had wisdom, power, and wealth. And because of his pride in material and status, his pride in self was exalted so that he might be willing to declare, I am a god, none can challenge me. I want to ask how this might look in your life. I have done good deeds, therefore I am righteous. I have money, therefore I am without need. I have studied relentlessly, therefore I am educated or intelligent. We even tell our children nowadays, you are so special because you are my baby. I have parents, therefore I am special. That isn't the mindset of our current generation. One that married couples are particularly bad at, myself very much so included in this, is I have done this for you, therefore I am deserving of this. Prideful, arrogant thoughts that we run over and over and over again in our heads. It's plain, it's blatant, it's out in the open, but we want to pretend that it isn't pride. We would say that we are justified in our statements and that our actions were suited. They belong to us. We made these choices. It's fair. I mean, after all, Ethbaal did make wise business decisions, and he did accumulate riches because of it. Why shouldn't he have room to boast? John chapter 5, Jesus says something that I find very interesting. Starting in verse 16. Now, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began persecuting him. So he told them, "My Father is working until now, and I too am working." For this reason, the Jewish leaders were trying even harder to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was also calling God his own Father, thus making himself equal with God. So Jesus answered them, "I tell you the solemn truth. The Son can do nothing on his own initiative, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he does, and will show him greater deeds than these, so that you will be amazed." Jesus, who is God in the flesh, spending his time healing others, has every reason to say, because I'm greater than you, that's why I can do it. Every justification to say that. Says that I only do what the Father does. God himself relinquishes all of it to the Father, the person of the Father. All wisdom, wealth, power, and authority comes from God. Every good deed and admirable thing comes from God. Ethbaal made the mistake of forgetting who gave him that wisdom in the first place, who gave him that birthright to take the throne, that breath in his lungs. If you want to kill arrogant pride, then you must remember that there is only one who has, one who is. We have nothing but what we were given, and what we were given we owe back to him. Now, the second disguise that pride wears, and this one, I think that this is the real reason why pride is the most dangerous. This one's subtle, it's crafty. He's quiet. Most of us don't think about him a whole lot. This one's name is dignity. We like him a lot. Dignity is that friend that you have that always had the best toys. He writes letters to celebrities and they write back to him. Back when you're in third grade, he rode a horse with John Wayne and he lifts weights with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He received the Medal of Honor from the president and shook his hand. See, dignity sounds great. He sounds really cool. But in reality, he's just a little liar. Dignity is that little voice that you hear that tells you you can figure it out on your own. You don't need help. When you clearly need help. Dignity pretends like he's giving you advice when he's really just watching out for himself. I want us to look at a passage. It's Matthew 26. And this is right after the Last Supper and right before Jesus is arrested at Gethsemane. Matthew 26, starting in verse 31. Then Jesus said to them, "This night you will all fall away because of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter said to him, "If they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "I tell you the truth, on this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will never deny you." And all the disciples said the same thing. That's where dignity presents itself. I wouldn't, and I would. Most often in fantasy scenarios that we've never had to live out. I would love to think that if I ever wound up homeless, that I would find a way to clean myself up, apply for other jobs, start from the bottom, grinding up to the top. I'd love to think that I would do that, but I've never been in that situation. I've never been starving without food or dying of thirst or had a child that I couldn't care for. I've never had $1 million or 1 million followers. I'm not famous, and I don't know how that would affect me. Probably not in a good way. I'd like to think that I wouldn't do the bad things and that I would do the good things instead, that my choices would be right. But that's all dignity's plan. See, the minute that we say to ourselves, "I wouldn't do that," or "I would do that," in response to another person's actions, what we're really saying is, I would react better than this person. I would make a better choice than this person. I would do better than they are. We don't know the struggles that another fellow human is facing. We don't know how far things might go before we ourselves break. All of us would say that we'd never resort to cannibalism, but most humans that have ever been stranded, that have lost lives there, all of them, almost all of them, revert to it eventually. And dignity wants to push things further than this. Dignity gets much worse. Because dignity wants to keep you from admitting your faults. Dignity, he wants you to rely on yourself. Dignity says, you're better than that. You're better than this. You're better than them. You don't need to see a marital therapist. They just need to listen to you. You don't need to be kinder. They need to toughen up. I've struggled with that one a lot. You don't need to ask for help. That would make you look weak. You don't need to apologize. You were right. That's one, I saw a meme this morning, actually. I wasn't planning on having any imagery for that, but there's a picture. It said, never apologize for being right. I can agree, you don't need to apologize about having your stance on something, particularly if it's right, but maybe you should apologize about the way that you've approached it. A lot of us probably get a little too aggressive, and a lot not quite as humble as we should be. And lastly, dignity, this is the worst of them. Dignity wants to stop you from really following Christ to the full extent. There's a book, I brought it with me. It's by Matthew Woodley. It's called Holy Fools, Following Jesus with Reckless Abandon. And there are two passages I want to read you from this book. So I'm going to start with the latter one first. The whole premise of this book is he analyzes people that made themselves fools for the sake of Christ, people that acted foolish, that we would say this is foolish, or we would condemn in our modern society. A young man named Moling, 7th century Irish holy fool, had such a Christ-like love for lepers that he developed a ministry for caring for their physical needs, even to the point of wiping the snot from their running noses. Christina, a young woman living in medieval France, developed a deep aversion to unpleasant body odors. Nevertheless, she felt compelled to bring the love of Christ to peasants with poor hygiene. As she bound their wounds, she avoided vomiting by frequently bolting outside for fresh air. Christiana continued her ministry to hygienically challenged peasants throughout her life. A young man named Francis came to Christ and promptly cast away all his possessions and his father's too. He walked barefoot and buck naked at least once, kissed lepers, and rebuilt a dilapidated church building on the outskirts of town. We call him a saint. His neighbors called him Pazo, madman. In Russia, during the 16th century, a Eurodivi, the Russian word for holy fool, named Basil, scandalized and enraged respectable church people by tripping the most righteous church members as they entered the church, throwing stones at the homes of rich people who ignored the poor, and bathing the feet of prostitutes and demoniacs with his tears. In the late 1800s, a 40-year-old single woman named Mary Slessor left her conventional church in Scotland and ventured into the heart of Western Africa. After mastering the language and learning the culture, she spent the rest of her life in the jungle adopting unwanted babies, protecting battered women, and warding off enraged hippos and tribal chiefs. About the same time, a young man named Hudson Taylor, a missionary in China, scandalized his respectable Christian friends by shaving his head, everything except the long braided pigtail worn by the Chinese men of his day. He also wore the traditional Chinese pajama-like clothing and ate with chopsticks. We consider him a paragon of cross-cultural engagement. His own mission board deemed him an extremist. This is at the beginning of the book. I'm going to read this first part. I'll never forget the day when my friend Alan, a contemporary holy fool, awakened my heart to love God on a deeper level. Alan, a plump little man in his late 30s, was born with Down syndrome. But that never stopped him from worshiping with us. Every Sunday, Alan, our most devoted worshiper, sat in the front pew, singing loudly and off-key and depositing a $1 bill in the offering plate. More than anyone else I know, Alan is crazy about God. Every year, Alan watched our church go through the motions of handing out Bibles to the 6th grade Sunday school classes. We marched the children through the routine procedure. Sorry, I get emotional at this one. Most of them receiving the Bibles with blank and listless faces. Alan, the founding member of the Happy Friends Sunday School class for those with disabilities, felt a little cheated. "Hey, how come we don't get Bibles?" he asked his teachers. Alan insisted that we give Bibles to the Happy Friends too. So 3 months later, during our main Sunday morning worship service, Alan and the Happy Friends received their Bibles, but it was far from routine. As I gave a Bible to Alan, he started weeping. And then, with dramatic flair, Alan held the Bible high over his head for 30 seconds. Everyone watched in rapt attention as he lowered the Bible to his lips, fervently kissing it and then embracing it as if it were a teddy bear. Alan continued beaming and praising God until I finally invited him to sit down. Alan's playful, love-ravished sermon unsettled God's settled people. He disrupted my agenda and pierced my heart on that Sunday morning. Alan's enthusiasm subverted our expectations, undercutting our spiritual complacency and our listless routine of worship. In the process, he awakened our hearts to the wonder of God's grace. Such is the power of the Holy Fool. Dignity does not want stuff like that to happen. Dignity wants to make you think that, no, it wouldn't be accepted. I was talking to my wife this morning on our drive up we talked to our kids about David dancing naked. He gets excited, it's in 2 Samuel, but he's bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and he's thrilled. He's excited, and he goes dancing and worshiping, and as he's doing this, he's doing it so dramatically, so fervently. He, the king, is throwing his clothes off as this is happening until he's completely naked, bouncing around on the street. And I was talking to Deborah, and I said, one of the things that gets me is I talk about this, and I say to people, well, I wouldn't recommend doing that, but that's the type of passion that we should have. And it kind of hit me this morning. Well, not this morning, yesterday morning. It hit me that it wasn't considered traditional or acceptable in that time either. Why would it be that I'd tell somebody, oh no, don't do that now? Because society doesn't like it, because it's not appropriate? We need to get over ourselves and throw this dignity away. David's statement, his wife berates him. His wife berates him for doing what he did and says, you're the king. You're the king and you're dancing around in front of servants and everyone. You look like an idiot. And David tells her, for my king, I will become even more undignified than this. I don't think there's anything I can say that proves my point better than that does. Lay dignity to rest. It doesn't care for you. It just wants to protect your pride. And I mean exactly that, your pride. So when we deal with pride, it's usually in ourselves. It's all focused in our own accomplishments and our own perceived value. How much better we are than everyone else. Every form of pride that presents, it begins with I. I have. I am. I wouldn't, or I would. It's the antithesis of what we are called to do, to walk in humility. So how do we handle this? How do we lay arrogance and dignity to rest? Where do we draw our lines? In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Starting in verse 26, Paul writes, "Think about the circumstances of your call, brothers and sisters. Not many were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were born to a privileged position. But God chose what the world thinks foolish to shame the wise. And God chose what the world thinks weak to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, what is regarded as nothing, to set aside what is regarded as something, so that no one can boast in his presence. He is the reason you have a relationship with Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord." Remember, that line of contention moves throughout the battle. So flip the script. Instead of I, make it him. We boast in the Lord, rejecting all credit, all value, all dignity. We boast in his deeds. We boast in how he has worked in fellow believers' lives and how he's worked in our lives. We boast in what only he can accomplish and what he has accomplished. And we mirror him. We live as he lived, to serve as he served. Jesus, God in flesh, who briefly became a little lower than the angels, not for his sake, but for ours. The God of all creation who humbled himself and stepped out like a man. We do communion every Sunday. And this is the crux of what communion is about. God put on flesh. He walked this earth with us. He faced the same struggles that we did. And then his body was broken and his blood spilled. He gave it willingly. None could take it from him. He did this so that we could be in relationship with him, and he didn't have to. He could have taken us all out and started from the beginning. He could have made us mindless robots that automatically followed him without a choice. He could have removed our ability to really love. But he did not do that. Instead, he took the challenge that none of us could, lived the life that none of us could, and died the death that we couldn't die. All so that we could be reconciled with him. I want us to remember that this morning as we go into communion. I want us to think about what it would mean for us to humble ourselves like Christ did, to show and reflect the same humility that Christ did, to let our bodies be broken and our blood spilled for those that we might consider ourselves better than, to live a life that mirrors his and to serve as he did.